Hello everyone and welcome back to Knowing Wheel episode 94. Yesterday, of course, it's our tribute show to Pascal Wehrlein, to probably about the 6 of you listening out there that remember him back in Formula 1. I'd honestly still argue he's probably the driver I'd most, or up there for a driver I'd most like to see come back into Formula 1 who didn't get a fair shot. I think it's
That's got to be the record
but
for the fastest tangent in this podcast. That is insane that you've managed to rant about Wehrlein already 5 seconds in.
Well, I haven't even introduced you yet.
No.
But you're just butting in there, apparently. But I want Pascal Wehrlein back in Formula 1. I think he deserves a shot.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But hello, everyone. I'm here. Since Pascal Wehrlein's got more of an introduction than me this week. So
That has got to be, I think, one of the sloppiest intros we've ever done to the show. But, you know, 2023 was, we're still trying to get back into the new year, aren't we, Jamie? We've got a few things to talk about today. Of course, as is always the case with the show, we do a podcast. We record on a Monday, it goes live on a Tuesday. And then I think it was last Tuesday morning, Andretti and Cadillac confirmed, or it might have even been last Monday night, wasn't it, that they were going to be teaming up.
it was certainly within 24 hours of
Formula
recording that there was massive F1 news about 11th team dropped. Classic.
It's just always the way, isn't it? I mean, have you actually seen as well? We'll discuss it in just a moment. About I think it's Panthera as well that are apparently going to try and enter into Formula 1. So, yeah, of course, let us know then down in the comments below what other exciting news you think will have come out before the show goes live, but after we've recorded, because there will be something crazy that gets confirmed tomorrow morning. But, yeah, let's jump into it then, Jamie. Cadillac and Andretti teaming up for 2020, well, we don't know when yet, probably 2026.
Indeed. And we obviously have heard rumblings of Andretti coming to Formula 1 as a brand new team.
Kind of coming back, isn't it?
Bringing an old name back, yeah, it's a bit weird. A bit like the Team Lotus back in the day. But yeah, it's good news all round for F1, apart from for the 10 teams, because they're always a bit negative towards this kind of thing, because it basically means the money gets shared a bit more thinly. But yeah, for everyone else, it looks like they're gaining credibility, which is good news. And hopefully nothing blocks their path to Formula 1.
So you're all aboard getting Andretti in, are you?
Absolutely. Get them in. Another American team.
Fair enough. We could do with another one, could we? I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? And I know we've spoke about it before, but it amazes me still that Haas don't completely just go all out American in Formula 1, especially with how much the sport... It feels like they're missing out on a huge marketing opportunity by not just doing that.
Especially with how... It's like they're ready-made to be that team, with Gunther Steiner at the helm, like the colour schemes.
Gunther Steiner, the famous American.
No, I know he's not American,
Italian.
but the whole attitude of the team seems to be like traditionally American, which hopefully isn't a stereotype that I shouldn't have said. But
I can't work out what stereotype you're trying to make.
It's like super brash, like here we are, we're gonna beat everyone with like no... like just brute force. I don't know where I'm going with this, but when you think of a typical like traditional Americanism, Haas could fully go for it with like Logan Sargent, the other one, who's the New Garden.
Oh, what?
Or is he still around?
Okay, fair enough. He's still around, yeah. Bring back Scott Speed, I say.
Scott Speed, bring him back. Yeah, it could be massive for Haas, but I guess that maybe is one team that is a bit annoyed about Andretti coming in, because their American market, or their like stranglehold on the American market, might be loosened a little bit by a second team, and also by Logan Sargent being in the sport as well. They have a few more choices than just to go for the one American team there is.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we've tried to speak about Andretti there and immediately have gone back to Haas.
Yeah.
But from their perspective, of course, they might... Oh, no, they've already said, haven't they? They want to try and get an American driver in. Whether, that would be a Logan Sargent or a Colton Herta or a Joseph Newgarden, like you said, we would have to wait and see. But, yeah, it's strange, isn't it, of course? Because as fans, we want... I mean, in the perfect world, Jamie, how many teams would you have on a Formula 1 grid?
I think... basically between 10 and 12 is the ideal. I think you obviously F1 back in the day had like no regulation of how many teams could be in F1, so you'd have all the like pre-qualifying and all of that rubbish, and you had to be within a certain, it was 107%, wasn't it, to qualify for the race. And yeah, you could have, I don't know, anywhere like up to 35, 40 cars, like talking about 60s and 70s. And it wasn't good for the sport overall, because it just wasn't high caliber teams and drivers, and yeah, it kind of dampened the essence of the sport. But since, I don't know, the early 90s, I would say, like when the teams got a bit more serious and you kind of got rid of all the dross, apart from Andrea Moda for a bit. But since,
I mean, the 80s and 90s were the worst
Yeah,
generation
true.
for just
Yeah.
having absolute garbage
you
show
kind
up.
of have like one or maybe two. Obviously, we had the three teams at once in the 2010s, early 2010s, but it's mostly two that are kind of a bit cut adrift, which is a shame. But the more teams you add, the more likely you are to get like 3 or 4 or 5 teams that are just cut adrift, which is not what you want at all. So I think, yeah,
No,
10 to 12 is
no.
kind of the happy medium. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, you know, we've still got this maximum, haven't we, of 13 teams, 26 cars on a Formula One grid. And, you know, Formula One has really tried to steer away. I think, you know, they're so against having, you know, a HRT back in Formula One, or, you know, a Caterham or a Manor Marussia to a certain degree as well. So, you know, that $200 million that you have to put forward to Formula One, you know, of course, some of that does get paid out to the current teams as well, which I think, you know, softens and sweetens the deal slightly. But it is just the other things, isn't it? You know, we sort of talk about the prize pot. You know, this is why none of the other teams want a new team in Formula One. It's for two big reasons, isn't it? One, the prize pot gets diluted because you're sharing it out between 11 rather than 10. And two, I think there's still some big genuine fear between, you know, the likes of Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, that Andretti could pretty quickly be the real deal.
Yeah, and it's all well and good. The likes of Mercedes have always been typical of saying this kind of thing, and Red Bull in the last year as well. They're always saying, oh, we want more competition. It's great if Ferrari and Alpine and McLaren can be up there. But then as soon as a genuine threat comes at them that they have some doubt if they could beat, they're like, no, we don't want them anymore. Ultimately, they want to win, and competition is not what they want. So, yeah, if Andretti do come in and suddenly Mercedes, Red Bull think they're going to be good and good enough to start battling at the front, that's a bad sign, obviously, and they will want to put a stop to that.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, even going back to, you know, the prize pot and things like that, you know, I've already seen a couple of, you know, hints towards other teams going, well, everyone could get the same amount of money as they already get if Ferrari got rid of their historic bonus.
Yeah.
But there still seems to be this belief that, and I don't know about you, Jamie, but there's this belief still, isn't there, that if Ferrari didn't get that bonus anymore, that they would still pack their bags and go home. And I'm not convinced you didn't. No.
Well, the thing is,
no, exactly.
I watched a video a couple of years ago, which I don't know if it still is the same as it is now, but the historic bonus isn't just for Ferrari, it's for all teams that are over 25 years old, as I think it's 25 years anyway, it might be less. But that's all the teams apart from Haas, because it's in all their guises if they're over 25 years.
There's two separate ones, I think. Or there's technically, it's bizarre the way F1 prize money works, and of course we won't go fully into it today. But Ferrari automatically get a bonus that means no matter where they finished, I think they're guaranteed to earn at least the second. Like, even if they finished last, they'd still earn the second most out of every team. Williams also get a tiny bonus in comparison, which I think is known as the heritage bonus. And then, to be honest, I was unaware of any other teams apart from the 6-year bonus.
Is it
which
6
was
years?
just
Maybe it is.
I think it's 6 years, so even Haas now are going to be onto that in 2023, where it's just based on your average result at the end of each constructors season over those last 6 years, which of course every team now is getting as well. So you kind of think Williams probably desperately need that money.
Ferrari really
don't. If you're in the FIA and you're sort of looking at it, you know, Ferrari, of course, you know, they came from a $500 million a year budget a couple of years ago to $135 million. That money's not just disappeared. Of course, some of it's gone into the LMDH program and things like that.
And their wages are still separate to that as well.
Exactly, the wages are still separate. But surely you think, even if you were at risk of losing Ferrari, Audi, Porsche, Cadillac, Andretti.
Do you need them?
Does kind of balance it out a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little. And yeah, obviously, we've seen in the past the FIA are basically run by Ferrari or ex-Ferrari personnel. But that kind of, I mean, it still is the case in terms of personnel, but they don't seem to have them in their pocket quite as much as they used to. So, yeah, I wonder if someone's going to pull the trigger at some point and just confront Ferrari about getting rid of this money. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. Well, we'll say this now, and it'll happen tomorrow.
Yeah, this is the breaking news that happens this
Ferrari
morning.
will leave the sport, yeah, before tomorrow. But, you know, there's been other talks about, haven't there, about Cadillac and Andretti. Of course, Andretti, the first big hurdle was proving that they'd have 200 million to get into the sport. They proved that. Teams kind of squashed their hopes and went, we're not interested. The FIA then said, right, you've got to have manufacturer backing. So they've turned around with Cadillac, and I don't know whether you noticed this as well, Jamie, but of course, you know, that was absolutely the biggest news in Formula One last week. Nothing about it on Formula One's website. Nothing at all.
Yeah.
It's still quite clear the way Formula One feel about it.
I think it's a bit bizarre because I did see some articles from Mohammed bin Sulayem, the FIA president, who basically said he's really surprised by the negative reaction from the teams. Like, he doesn't know why the teams aren't more open, which, I mean, obviously we've just explained and expanded on the reasons why the teams aren't more open, but it's good signs for me at least that the FIA president is a fan of having a new team, even if it's going to take a while for that to trickle through the FIA and into the teams themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's difficult, and it does already feel like there's a bit of a grudge match going on. I mean, it is quite funny if you go through his tweets. Half of them just seem like notepad rants that he's put on Twitter, which is quite funny, to be honest. But, you know, it is quite good that, you know, we've got someone vocal, and it does genuinely, you know, when you get moments like that, it does feel like he's genuinely there for the fans of the sport as well, rather than just making sure that the teams are happy. Sometimes he makes dodgy puns at the awards shows and things like that, but that was still uncomfortable viewing looking back. But there's been this talk, hasn't there, that are Cadillac just kind of going to be a placeholder name that Andretti, you know, a bit like Alfa Romeo with Sauber, isn't it? You know, they haven't really actually contributed a lot other than just being a title sponsor.
Well, yeah, it could basically be like a Trojan horse for Andretti getting in. They told them they need to get a constructor, so it's like, here you go. And they're not actually going to do anything. It's just like lip service, basically. But that could be the case. Like in a few years' time, they could find a different American manufacturer, or maybe just like get rid of the manufacturer and go back to like what Sauber have intermittently been, just a like an independent works team. But yeah, we'll have to definitely wait and see. I don't see, like, you know, with the likes of Audi and Porsche, like you kind of see for rumblings for ages of those kind of manufacturers wanting to get in. You haven't really had that with Cadillac. It's kind of like came out of nowhere. So maybe that's a sign that they don't want a Formula One project of their own, but they're happy to back someone else's.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? I think I don't know, of course, whether it's the same in the US as well, but I think in Europe we kind of just view Cadillac as this big SUV brand that does nothing else. But they're on the LMDH hype train. Let's not forget that as well. And their LMDH car does look incredibly strong. You know, I'm very, very excited for Daytona 24 when we see a few more of these cars running in more serious fashion. You know, they're really trying to rebrand themselves at the moment, and I think Formula One could be a fantastic avenue for that. And will I be turning around and picking up a Cadillac anytime soon? Probably not. But, you know, we did see this brand shift with Mercedes, didn't we? When they came back to Formula One, you know, 10, 15 years ago, Mercedes weren't really that big of a car company outside of Germany. Of course, they were still very big, but the way they've been able to turn it around using Formula One branding has been nothing short of a miracle over the last 10 years. Yeah,
definitely. They're so much bigger now than they were in 2009 before they joined, and that is, in some degree down to Formula One, and maybe other manufacturers are picking up on that.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting times ahead. So, Jamie, let's say then, as the big news tomorrow, that we're both in a coma, we wake up in 2026, we do episode 95 and Knowing Wheel. Will we be talking about Andretti Cadillac on the grid? Yes or no?
I optimistically think yes, actually, which is a nice surprise because F1 is usually very negative.
Yeah. The amount of times we kind of talk about a team and then just nothing happens from it. Which leads us on nicely, I think, Jamie, to Panthera, the other company that want to try and make it into Formula One. Have you heard much about this? I hadn't heard about it until one of my mates mentioned it to me when I was at the pub last week, because we're British.
I don't believe that story at all because you don't have any friends.
Okay, fair enough.
And especially not at the pub, but there we go. I mean, this news story screams US F1 or Stefan GP.
Honestly, it's weird though, isn't it? Because so what I'm now having to just read an article about it just to make sure that I've got my facts correct. But they want to be Panthera or Panthera, I don't really know for sure. Panthera Asia Formula One team. Now, Asia again is another. I mean, we spoke about this last week, didn't we? About where could replace Shanghai for the Grand Prix. There's a huge, very big potential Asian market for Formula One still. You know, if we get a proper all-out American Formula One team, why don't we also get a proper all-out Asian Formula One team?
Yeah, it's definitely a market that F1 want to, like, it makes sense to try and pursue because it's huge. There's billions of people that are basically untapped potential in terms of Formula One, other than a few countries where obviously F1 went decades ago. But it would definitely be a big opportunity, and it would be something in the interest of the FIA and Formula One generally to expand in that area. And they've been doing so with drivers. Obviously, we've got the likes of Joe as the first Chinese driver, Tsunoda. Obviously, Japan's had quite a heritage with like the likes of Kobayashi and Nakajima, Satoru, and people like that. So, yeah, I think it's definitely an opportunity they would try and do, but I think they've got to wait for the right time, and maybe a completely independent team with not much credibility is not the right time.
No, but I think, you know, the FIA Formula One, they'll probably do a lot of rigorous checks because, again, you know, like we said, they don't want a US F1, they don't want a HRT back in the sport. So I feel like, again, if you can afford to put that 200 million up front, even if you have a couple of really bad years to start off with, you are, you know, sort of 3-4 seconds off the pace. If you've got that cash flow coming in and you've got that access, maybe there's still a bit of hope that we could get back up to 24 cars in the future, because it's quite important as well. Panthera have said they're not trying to fight Andretti over one seat on the grid. They want to fight with them for 2 seats on the grid, or 4 technically, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
And it would be a big thing for F1 if they had an all-out Asian team, because obviously we've had Honda in the past and Toyota. It's Japanese teams, but outside of Japan, I'm not sure. Like, there's never been a Kia Formula One team, for instance. So, yeah, it would be big if a team from Asia outside of Japan could make it. That would be massive.
I mean, there are still, speaking of that, subtle things here and there. And again, you know, this could, we don't sort of know a huge amount, like I said, about Panthera. Hyundai, you know, they've ummed and ahed. There's been quiet rumblings around the place, and Hyundai, I tell you what, are doing magnificent work elsewhere still at the moment. It would not surprise me if, you know, they kind of ended up in a relationship similar to Cadillac and Andretti down the line.
You never know.
You just simply never know. But let's move it on then, Jamie. We've spent a lot of time talking about potential new Formula One teams, you know, the big news of the week. One that might have gone slightly under the radar for a lot of people was Portimao. I don't know if you saw this. It's been a little bit cheeky over on the Instagram. I think it was yesterday at the time of recording this. They posted out a message. Let me see if I can just find it again quickly on my phone. Wishing Lewis Hamilton a happy birthday. But also saying, rather, well, some would say cryptically, some would say absolutely just trying to make it obvious, that he's the only winner of the Portimao Grand Prix so far.
That's an absolute classic social media manager having an absolute laugh there. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about this because, I'm thinking of going to a Grand Prix, which maybe I can't go to now. I don't actually know, so Portugal could be one that I go to instead. but yeah, that's up in the air. So I had heard a little bit. It logistically makes somewhat sense, but also for the planet it doesn't. We kind of spoke about this last week. But what's the race after? It's Asian,
Azerbaijan.
Yeah, it's Baku. So to go from Australia completely across Europe to then go back completely across Europe, yeah, I mean, obviously the whole calendar could do with a reshuffle, but this is just another like tip of the iceberg, I guess, that doesn't really make sense logistically, if I get the words correct. But in terms of suitability for an F1 race, we know it's got good recent history as well. It's a good track, drivers love it, good facilities, and yeah, why not? And you never know, I could be in Portugal in a couple of months' time, hopefully.
Should we go Portuguese Grand Prix? We'll do no and wheel on site.
We could live after show.
We'll do a live show as the race is going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if I was a betting man now, though, I'd be putting my money on Portimao. You know, again, there's still this thing, isn't there, about how China still want to host a Grand Prix next year because COVID rules are constantly changing. So Formula One's kind of been backed into a corner where they either try and get a race to replace it, or you try and work out a way that you get a race that was later on in the year to fill that gap, that Shanghai could then potentially fill that race's slot. But then you'd have to try and then get Portimao to potentially fit that race if Shanghai still can't host. So it's all a bit complicated, but at the end of the day, you don't go up against the CCP.
It is a bit of a logistical nightmare. And China
crazy.
Still, I think it's a good sign they're still on a race, because for a while we kind of thought they were on their way out. And I hope for F1's sake and for the Chinese fans' sake that they are able to run a race again in the future, whether it's 2023 or beyond. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. And especially with Zhou Guanyu on the grid, it feels like there's even bigger of a reason at the moment to try and really push for one once again. Talking about other things though, Jamie, we've got 2 more car reveals, or car reveal dates even, to go through. They are McLaren and Alpine. Now, of course, McLaren I'm pretty certain is going to be confirmed at the MTC like it is basically every year. But Alpine, they've confirmed their car reveals going down in London, which was quite a surprise, at least to me.
Yeah, I don't really know why. They usually do Viri or Enstone or both. But yeah, Alpine traditionally do like a stock style car with but obviously we're not aerodynamicists, so it doesn't really matter to us. But McLaren usually is the real car, so that'll be the kind of the first confirmed so far date of us seeing a real 2023 car with all of its bells and whistles, and we can watch other people tell us what all of them do, because all we can do is look at the colour and go, oh look, it's orange, like every year. But there'll be we'll get videos out for them hopefully, as long as one of us doesn't book a holiday or something, which I haven't told Matt about yet, but there we go.
Fair enough. But yeah, McLaren, their car reveal is going to be on February 13th. Of course, then we've got Ferrari on the 14th, and Alpine is on February 16th, which I don't think... So McLaren, does overlap with Aston Martin, but Alpine looks like they've got a free date as of now. The other thing we kind of wanted to speak about then, Jamie, wasn't it, before we wrap up the show today, was... we're starting to look in towards 2023 now. Most things are kind of, apart from the actual cars and the pace, a lot more things are kind of getting set in stone. 3 drivers under pressure then, as we head into the new season. We've kind of, we spoke pre-show, just having a bit of a look through. We've picked out 3 names that we think have really got to try and deliver in 2023. Jamie, give us the rundown.
Yeah, so it feels like we made one of these lists last year. I think we may have done, or at least mentioned it in 2021 as well. Maybe mid-season that was, but every time we do this, it feels like we mention Yuki Tsunoda, who is the first driver that we think is under pressure this year. Along with that, we've got also Zhou Guanyu, it pains me to say it, is probably going to face a bit of pressure for that Alfa Romeo / Audi seat. And also, if I remember the other one, Sergio Perez at Red Bull, of course, having a bit of heat from the third driver, although If Ricciardo's just there to earn money and have fun, then maybe not. But we'll have to wait and see. But I'll start off with expanding a little bit on Tsunoda. Obviously Toro Rosso / AlphaTauri have always been an absolute pressure cooker for young drivers, and Tsunoda feels a bit of a placeholder at this point, kind of like we were saying about Gasly, but Tsunoda is, in my opinion, worse. Like, he's kind of never really kicked on. Obviously, he's going to his third season. Traditionally, Toro Rosso / AlphaTauri drivers get 3 years to develop, and if he doesn't deliver this year, I think it could be curtains for him, sadly, because it's been a while and they're a very impatient team. Helmut Marko is a tough operator to work under, so hopefully for Yuki's sake he's able to pick it up and really kind of put De Vries in the shade, which is what he could. If he does that, I think he's safe. But the way De Vries came into Williams and delivered fairly well, obviously it kind of was the perfect storm of that weekend, as we've said before. But if Tsunoda loses to De Vries, I reckon Red Bull / Helmut Marko will kind of be like, why are we messing around with this guy? And they've obviously got Liam Lawson, etc. coming.
Exactly, and I think this is the thing, isn't it? You know, when you sort of look at Yuki Tsunoda's time, it's been very, very weird, of kind of the perfect storm and also like bizarre as well, isn't it? He's had like the absolute quintessential young Red Bull Junior career, but also in like a completely wrong way. So, you know, ran a decent Formula 2 campaign all the way back in 2020, wasn't it? Now that seems like a worryingly long time ago, all of a sudden. Finished third that year, got promoted up into Formula 1, one of the 3 rookies to, of course, get promoted up ready for 2021. Delivered fantastically in his opening Formula 1 Grand Prix, but then kind of admitted throughout the entirety of that year that he wasn't quite prepared, ready. You know, he could have done with a second year in F2, you know, build up his fitness and things like that. 2022, he definitely spent more time a lot closer to Pierre Gasly, wasn't it? Yeah. And then has kind of maybe been a bit lucky that Pierre's gone to Alpine, so he's kind of taken up that senior role, if you will, within AlphaTauri. But I think unless he comfortably puts De Vries away, it really is a case of seeing what those F2 drivers do, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously F2 is traditionally like a breeding ground for Red Bull young drivers. Like the amount of, I think there were 7 on the grid last year. It's probably going to be at least, you'd imagine, 5 again this year. You've got Lawson in Super Formula, which is generally Red Bull's favoured thing for drivers to do in the gap between F2 and F1 if they need the gap. We saw Gasly do that. Van Dorn did it for McLaren, not Red Bull. If he does well in Super Formula, you never know for Liam Lawson. I'm still backing him for the AlphaTauri seat, even this late. Yuki's got a lot of pressure and a lot of competition for that seat. Hopefully, the likes of Dennis Hauger, the guy in F3. What's his name? In F3. The guy who came like second in F3 was a Red Bull young driver, I believe.
Not Jack Crawford.
The Zach Crawford, you mean?
It is Jack. It is Jack,
sorry.
Thank you.
F3 2022. Google's going to sort me right.
I know his name. I know it because he was the one that crashed at Monza, wasn't it?
Zane Maloney.
Ruined his own qualifying. Was it? Oh, no, that was not.
Isaac Hadjar, the Red Bull one.
Yes.
Zane Maloney has got moved up to F2, but I can't remember who he's with.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's definitely a lot of pressure, isn't there? Maloney now is Red Bull, yes. He wasn't at the time. Yeah. That's where I was getting a bit muddled up there. But, yeah, I think Yuki's got a lot of pressure coming from the junior formulas and, like you said, Super Formula as well. I loved it as well. I saw a fantastic thing a couple of days ago talking about how funny it is that Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda, which one you'd guess has raced in Japanese Super Formula. Yeah. It's quite funny when you think about it as well. But yeah, like obviously Jamie briefly mentioned, though, Zhou Guanyu is our second driver we feel is going to be under pressure during 2023. Like Jamie's obviously spoke high praises of him throughout the entirety of last year, and certainly, he definitely did kick on a lot better than I think a lot of people, even at the start of the year, myself included, I will openly admit, Zhou Guanyu did a lot better than I thought he would.
Eat that humble pie, live on camera.
Jamie's going to have that clipped everywhere. But it still doesn't feel like he's home and dry yet, though, does it? As we move into 2023.
Not quite.
He's got to prove himself again, Bottas, once more, because there is still a feisty Frenchman who I think is, again, racing in F2 next year, aren't they?
I believe Teo Porcher is indeed going into his third season in F2, but is still only 19 years old, which is pretty crazy. And obviously Sauber Jr. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I think, Teo Porcher had such an unlucky season last year in F2. Came runner-up, but obviously was trounced by Drogovic, but certainly shouldn't have been trounced by Drogovic. Whether it would be safe to say he lost the title due to reliability, I think might be a bit too high praise. But he certainly should have been in the championship fight. Drogovic shouldn't have been able to walk away with it with a round to go.
And F2's all about momentum as well. And his momentum was screwed many times by reliability.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Zhou Guanyu, I think, is again going to have to be looking over his shoulder towards the lower formulas. But like Jamie said, though, Sergio Perez might have to be looking over his shoulder within the Red Bull team, which is quite rare, isn't it, nowadays? We don't often think about third drivers being the threats anymore.
Yeah, obviously Daniel Ricciardo was kind of shuffled out of McLaren in quite, I thought the word magnanimous. I'm going to say that's a word. I'm not sure if it is. Magnanimous, that's the word. Fashion. Thank you, Matt, for that one. But yeah, he's obviously gone to Red Bull as that third driver. Rather than reserve, because Liam Lawson is still the reserve driver, Ricciardo is just the third driver, which means he gets to do show days and do donuts in Paris and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a bit bizarre that they've got a driver of his caliber, like Formula One race winner, like at one point, not even that long ago, like end of 2020, people would have had him in their top fives, like probably of that year, and top fives generally as well. So,
but he finished top five that year,
he did. He came fourth in the championship. Or
was
fifth,
fourth?
sorry.
I thought
Perez
it was behind
Perez,
Perez, to be honest, yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that he's now not got a seat and actually is within the Red Bull team, like, that's very bizarre and is probably quite uncomfortable for if you're a certain Red Bull second driver. Yeah, I don't know if Ricciardo will do enough like sim work and practice work and stuff like that to get back in, but like he's still got the desire. He was very open about the fact that it hurt to get kicked out of F1, so he clearly wants, or hopefully he clearly wants to come back, and if he puts the work in within Red Bull, doing all the sim work and all the necessary stuff you have to do, and Perez doesn't have a good year, if he's again like the traditional 6/10 off Max, which is pretty poor for a teammate, then yeah, there's no reason why they wouldn't put Ricciardo back in and just kind of go full circle back to 2018, and hopefully it works out a bit better this time. But I'd imagine Max has come a long way since then, so hopefully it wouldn't be quite as volatile as it was.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I don't know if you saw this as well a couple of days ago, but Gunther Steiner actually confirmed that he did reach out to Daniel Ricciardo about a seat for 2023. I think Ricciardo was their first choice instead of Nico Hülkenberg to replace Mick Schumacher. So it does really make you wonder whether Red Bull have sort of gone, look, you sit this year out, you prove on the sim how close you are to Max still, get Checo out at the end of his contract, you might have a top seat again in 2024, and that's all that Ricciardo's really after. Would he match up to Max Verstappen anymore? I don't know for sure, but
I would say
crazier things have happened in the past. He was he did beat him in 2017, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but of course Max was
DNFs.
still like 13 by then. I feel like he could still be very close to Max though, and if we see Mercedes push on in 2023, if we see Ferrari get their act together, they might need a driver that's that close to Max again, rather than sort of a half a second, 6/10 off like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think Max would prefer having Daniel back, just on a personal level, but I don't think he's going to lose sleep over it if Perez does stay as his teammate, to be honest, because he'll probably trounce either one of them, in my opinion.
I think, yeah, the other big question, isn't it, is still, will we see the revenge arc of Sergio Perez in 2023?
Absolutely not.
That could... No, don't get me wrong, I don't think he'll beat Max. I'm not suggesting that for a second, but could we see him, if he's told to let Max buy a bit more, could we see him go, actually, you know what, lads, I'm alright?
Yeah, I think we could see that a little more, but if he does do that, he's even more at risk of Ricciardo coming for his seat, to be honest. So he might play his cards safe.
Very, very true, Jamie. I think we've gone through everything we needed to, though, today if I'm not mistaken.
I believe we have.
So, final question then, Jamie, to round out the show. Red Bull's 2024 lineup is going to be Max Verstappen and...
Checo Perez.
Oh, okay. That was not genuinely the response I was expecting.
Yeah, I was tempted to go Ricciardo, but that will come back to bite me in a clip somewhere on YouTube.
I'm going to say Ricciardo. I'm going to go out there now. But yeah, thank you all, as always, so much for listening. If you have enjoyed, please do make sure to leave a like, get yourself subscribed. If you're watching this on YouTube as well, please do click the links down in the description. Check out our other social media pages. We're trying to do more and more various things with Noah and Wheel as we head into the 2023 season. For those of you that have followed on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, it has been greatly appreciated so far. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming out over the course of the year. But thank you all so much for listening, as always, and we will be back next week with episode 95. We're getting closer and closer, Jamie, to that 100th episode. It's going to be quite a special one.